Hello, hello, everybody. Hope you're well on this beautiful, beautiful day. So today I'm doing this live with you to share with you the most amazing freelance journalist. We are very lucky to have Linda with us. Linda first interviewed me, probably over 10 years ago for the Daily Mail, and it was an article that actually changed my business. It was a great opportunity to get my business at the time really well known. So it was great that we kept in touch, and Linda agreed to share her insider knowledge on how you can get your stories printed. But before we kind of start with the questions and everything, because this is all about you as a business owner, how you can get published, how you can share your story and what makes a great story. Just want to tell you a little bit about Linda. So we're just slightly ahead of 12 o'clock. So by the time that I've introduced Linda, hopefully we can then dive in. So Linda is an experienced freelance journalist who has interviewed thousands of business leaders, ranging from the founders of SMEs to the CEOs of globally listed companies. She specializes in business, personal finance, franchising and health, and she also has written news, features and content about business in a massive range of sectors. She's written weekly about small business, franchising, has worked for years on a weekly franchising column for the Daily Mail. She enjoys finding out what makes the business tick and uncovering its own unique stories, and every business has one. Linda, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be with you.
No, it's great. Before we start this interview, we're having, and it's my problem, we're having a few audio challenges today. So I'm sorry if it sounds echoey. If I sound like I'm in the bathroom, I'm not. I'm having to play this through an external speaker, so apologies, but I didn't want you to miss out on this interview. So Linda, thank you. So tell us about you've obviously been doing journalism for a long time. How has it changed?
Well, obviously, it's changed from the point of view of the number of platforms. I don't want to seem as if I'm 150, but when I started off, I was using a manual typewriter and carbon paper. And to get my copy up to the newspapers and magazines in town, I was in London then, I would go to the end of the road, flag down a taxi, give it to them with the address and give them some money. And they were quite delighted with this because they didn't have a fare. They just had to drop it off at some newspaper office somewhere. But since then, obviously, it's completely transformed. It's fantastic. You have to be good at communicating with anybody and everybody as before, but now you have to be good at it in 20 different ways.
Brilliant. So tell us, just so for those that are joining us, because we're connected to a lot of solopreneurs, small business owners and entrepreneurs, and the big businesses as well. What's the difference between a freelancer and an in-house journalist?
Well, from my point of view, an in-house journalist is really slave to the editor to a much greater extent than a freelancer is. Obviously, as a freelancer, you've got to be open to doing what people want when they want it and to their deadlines. And I like that because I'm a kind of, rush to the barricades and sort this out in 10 minutes person. But I have spent quite a lot of time working in newspaper offices. And I like it, and it's great fun, but I much prefer working for myself. There is no better boss than you.
Yeah.
And they give you time for childcare.
Yes, that's true. So how does it work? Do you get commissioned a story then, or do you pitch stories in, or is it a bit of both?
A bit of both these days. Once upon a time, it really was much more of you get commissioned. And I don't like putting in pictures. But a lot of content marketers, the big content marketing companies these days, do like pictures. And pictures have kind of come back. Pitching was something amateurs did when I was younger. Professionals never needed to do that. It was all about who you knew.
Yeah.
But these days, you do have to do more pitching, and I don't mind doing that. I much prefer it when somebody I know calls up and says, "Here, there's an interesting thing I think you ought to write about, and we'll take it, and we want it next Thursday. Here's what we're going to pay you."
Yeah. So in terms of then, you say get commissioned an article from, say, the Daily Mail, and we'll come on to that in a minute because you've written off this in a lot of time. They've stopped their franchising feature now that they used to have it. Was it on a Wednesday or was it a Monday?
No, it used to be on Monday a long time ago, and then we had a remake, and then we had a careers page, which was education, careers, which I also wrote, which is one of my other great enthusiasms, and franchising, all on the same day, all on the Thursday.
Brilliant.
But they never put it online.
I know, and that's odd, isn't it? Because it has all shifted online now. So when you're writing, are you writing for just the print and not online anymore, or are you doing a bit of both?
Oh no, it's mostly online now. Okay. There is only, I write stuff for What Franchise magazine, and that goes into print and online, but it's the only thing I write now that goes into print. Everything else is an online blog, feature, content marketing. It's almost all online.
So okay, so diving in then, what do you look for in a story? And bearing in mind, and perhaps you can reassure anyone that's watching this, do we need to have a PR agency, or can we still get PR coverage by pitching in ourselves or working with you ourselves?
Both really. I sometimes find that I've written about a company I've been introduced to by a PR on a one-off basis, and I really like them, and I will go back to them for comments quite regularly. Other times, PR will suggest something that somebody else has got. I mean, really, it doesn't matter where it comes from. It's a question of what the story is. But as you will know, PR or journalist, you can spot a story a mile away, which very often business owners can't.
Yeah.
And I can see why they can't, because A, it's not their job, really. They're running a company. But B, they are, especially at the moment, so massively busy with just doing 1,000 other things that they don't get a chance to stand back and look at it from the outside. And that way you can see the wood for the trees, and a good journalist can see the wood for the trees. And very often I've interviewed people and they've said to me, I didn't realise my business was so interesting. And that's happened quite frequently because they're so tied up within it that they cannot see it for the exciting thing that it is.
So in terms of, writing a story, we've made some notes to it here. You put whatever the size of the business is, you have a good story to tell. Every business has one. So your kind of job is to spot those stories, but how does someone approach you with what they think is a great story? Do they need to write it as a press release, or could they just give a suggested headline and kind of summary? How would you like it? Because I know there's going to be an opportunity, and we'll share this at the end, where they can come and pitch and kind of have some ideas for stories and work with you in the future. But how can we approach you with what we think is a good story? What's the best way?
I like an email or a message on LinkedIn. I don't mind if it comes from somebody I don't know. Don't be worried about approaching me if you've never spoken to me before. A lot of people will say to me, can I use your phone number? Yes, of course you can. I'm in business. That my phone number is scattered across the UK. My email is known across the UK. My LinkedIn has got 600 people following it. I am my business, so I'm very happy to hear from you. And what I want to know from you, and sometimes if you're a small business or even a big business, you'll get this from other people. Somebody outside the business will say, you're really making skis to export to Switzerland. I just thought they'd made all their own. And that is great. And I would like an email. You don't have to write a story or anything. You just write, hello, I thought you might be interested. We're exporting skis to Switzerland. And
And Linda, sorry to interject, that is music sometimes to our ears, because some of us, and a lot of people that know me know I'm dyslexic, so writing is actually my biggest fear. So to know that I can just write you with a headline or kind of the angle of the story that I think you might be interested in. So that's okay. Like you say, your job is to write the story and to interview. Our job is to provide the source of information, isn't it?
Yeah. The one thing I would say, though, there's a kind of mistake that a lot of small businesses make, and I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised they do this, because they're copying big businesses. They will send me, and a lot of people in the PR community do this too, but I know they've been asked to do it by the small firm. They'll want a profile of the founder. Well, they're not Alan Sugar or Richard Branson. That's where they've got this from. You have to be a kind of celebrity business person first before you get profiles. I want a story. And then if I think you're really interesting, I might want a profile, but there's not many outlets for profiles. There's outlets for good stories, but until you are really a household name almost, profiles are hard.
One thing leads to another. The more you share your story, your knowledge, your value, then you become a credible source, to go back to refer back to, if they're helpful, if, they haven't pitched their business too much and they've offered more content, so you get a feel for it. And it's a relationship like anything, isn't it, with a journalist?
Absolutely. And one of the ways you build that is by making yourself available. There are still times when I call up and somebody who is answering the phone, I mean, I forgive them if they're working for an outsourced company, but the receptionist will say, I will explain who I am, that I want to speak to the boss, whoever that may be, and I want to talk about, and I'm a journalist, and I want to talk about X. And it's quite often that people will say, really? Are you sure? Well, he's busy. One of my messages, and I would say this, of course, is to say to all business people, train your reception. When a journalist rings up, this is great news. It's free media exposure. Grab it with both hands. If you're in a meeting, okay, fine. The receptionist should still be putting that journalist through to you. And you can say, right, Linda, I'm in a meeting right now, but I'd really like to speak to you about this. I'll be finished at 9:30, and I'll call you back, and do, because it's like giving away free money for most small businesses.
And that's so exciting, and I say this all the time, so it's lovely to hear you say it. This is a great opportunity, isn't it, for business owners? I mean, it really has an impact, and not just the profile, not just credibility. It puts cash in the bank of a business, doesn't it?
Oh, it can do. Definitely. There's people who've become really big media names by just talking to journalists, and, talk to the small ones first.
Yeah, well, I know that's a fact because you interviewed me. So those of you that know me, I started teaching everyone how to do their own PR because I learned how to do my own PR as a businesswoman first and foremost. So I had my magazine called Mums in Control. I franchised it around the country, and Linda was writing an article in the Daily Mail about flexible franchising. So she wanted to write the story, and then she wanted some case studies. And I, at the time, was using a PR agency, and the lead came from a PR agency. So I spoke to Linda, we had an interview, and she wrote up. And it was fantastic for my business, the amount of new franchisees we got on board. It really does make a difference, doesn't it, Linda? And I'm sure you've seen so many businesses that you've helped as well along the way.
Yeah, and I love to do that. And I love to hear stories like yours where you come back and say, it made a real difference. And business journalism can do that. But that's one of the reasons I like writing about SMEs.
Yeah.
SMEs are more fun, actually. It's easier when you call an SME to get a hold of the person in charge who can say something, because there's less bureaucracy. If you ring up big businesses, it can take you a week to get through to somebody who can say something. Well, a lot of journalists haven't got a week. I used to work in radio, and my God, in those circumstances, sometimes you've got 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But small businesses actually have a big advantage over big businesses when it comes to talking to journalists, because they are easier to get. And if somebody's good, you go back to them and back to them and back to them. You might have heard of Professor Carrie Cooper, who I used to interview quite frequently for the careers column that I wrote. He's a big expert in workplace psychology. And one of the big reasons, he was a professor at Lancaster, he's now somewhere else, but he came to fame when he was in Lancaster. And the reason was, he always answered the phone. I could have rung up Carrie Cooper at 2 o'clock in the morning and got a quote out of the guy, and he'd be happy to give it. And that really helps, because people go back to you.
And I think that's a massive, massive point. You know, you build that relationship, and then they're here to help them. And even if you can't help on that occasion, pass them on to someone that possibly can, you know, because like you say, it's a great relationship, but it's absolutely fantastic for your business. So what we say to everybody, you know, try and encourage to say, look at where you want to get featured, you know, and profiles match, see if your customers match the audience of the newspaper or the radio station, because everybody has a demographic. The Daily Mail definitely has a demographic, doesn't it, that it's trying to appeal to their readers.
Yeah, look, famously, it was the dream reader for the Money Mail pages where I used to work was 35-year-old working mum in marketing with 2 mop-top children, husband who runs a company, and a Dulux dog. And that was all newspapers have the fantasy reader. There was a point when I wrote for a newsletter, and it was all tax tips. And our dream reader then was man at the golf club who wants to say to somebody else, look, Fred, you're not doing the right thing there. What you want to do is this. And you can always picture these people.
Yeah, and that's the thing, you know, as business owners, we should be doing that. We should have our avatar. We should know who our ideal dream customer is, and it's matching it up, because PR isn't about ego. It's about the end in mind. It's about reaching and sharing your message with the right person, which is brilliant. I'm just going to go through a few of these. If you've just tuned in, we're talking to Linda Whitney, who's the freelance journalist, and Linda's been writing for newspapers and magazines for the last 20 odd years, a bit like me. We've been in the media a long time. I won't say how long. She's written for the Daily Mail. She's written for Franchising Magazine. She's just one of the greats. She really is. So we're so lucky to have her. So we're just asking questions here. We've talked about making yourself easily available that you've got here. You may ask, why do I need a journalist to tell our story? We know it better than they do. What would you say to that, Linda?
I would say, yes, you do know it better. That's why I'm ringing you, because I want an expert, and I want a view from somebody inside that business, inside that sector. You do know it better than me, but at the same time, I know better than you how to pitch it so that it's of interest to the maximum number of people, and it's much easier for you. Just tell your story to a journalist, and this happens all the time. I tell people. I interview people, I've done that this week. Send the interview back to them and say, is that okay? Not all journalists will do this, by the way, but some will. Send it back to them and say that, so is that okay? And they'll come back and say, wow, I never knew we were that interesting. And that happens quite a lot. And the reason for that is that it's an outsider looking for it.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. One of the things as well is that if you're watching this and you're kind of new to how we're helping people, is that journalists, a lot of, especially for the larger magazines or say the consumer magazines and the newspapers, they'll have specific journalists that will write about certain things. So it's like Linda's writing about SMEs, business, franchising. So you'll have a health editor, you'll have a manufacturing writer. So if you need any help finding those right journalists, please just feel free to email me or just put a message below, and we can arrange a time. I can show you how you can connect to the exact journalist, because that's the key, isn't it, Linda? I think some people don't know where to send their story. So it's great that we're talking to you today. And I know we've got another Meet the Journalist event, so we won't take up too much of your time today. We've got a Meet the Journalist event coming up on the 28th of May that anyone can register for. But it is journalists do write about certain things, don't they? And you really want to send your press release or your introductory email to the right journalist, don't you, rather than just going to the news desk?
Yes, how very true that is. In a way, that's when you're doing mass marketing, right? If you're a business, you research who you want to target first. And that's why journalists have this thing that used to be called, I don't even call it now, but it used to be called copy tasting. And I do that every single day because I get emails from hundreds of organizations. I probably get 100 emails a day. And I will open the emails up periodically and go through them. And if it's not relevant to me, I'll just chuck it out. That's it. But every now and again.
So what is it that do you read the headline? Do you open the email, or do you just, if the headline doesn't grab you, will you not open it? How does it work for you? I know everyone's slightly different.
I open the emails because, very often headlines aren't specific enough. Very often the title line of the email is too salesy, and yet underneath that there's a good story. So don't lead your email with blogs and co gains a great new customer. And that's just not very interesting. Start out with blogs and co is now supplying all the whistles that are going to be used in the FA Cup. And my apologies to the company that does this, because I've interviewed them. There is a company that makes ref whistles for use, and they are used in the FA Cup. And every time I watch the FA Cup, I think that's whatever, I can't remember their name now. That's Blogs and Co.'s whistle there. They make the action. And that's great. I love things like that.
And that's it, you spot the story as a journalist, you do. So let's just have a look at the last few questions and then we'll wrap it up. So you can do your own PR very effectively by working with journalists this way. So small businesses create profiles that far outstrip their business size just by talking to journalists, and it costs them very little. So to write a profile, what do you want to know about somebody? Do you want to know, do they have to have had media experience before, or is it just credentials of knowing their business and they're expert in their subject matter? What makes a good profile for you, or a good expert, should we say?
A good expert is somebody, the dream expert, right? The dream expert is somebody who can spot their own story. There's not many of them, but there are some, and they've usually done very well. They can spot their own story. They're willing to speak to you at the drop of a hat. They don't give you too much sales spiel. I don't want to, that's advertising. Okay, advertise that. If you've got 15 awards, great, well done you, but I don't want to know who they're for or when you got them. I want to know what makes you special. And also there are people who are just good talkers on the phone. Yeah. And some of them, the most entertaining ones, are people who've got good jokes to tell.
That's good to know. Okay. And you're so true, because, advertising is logical. So advertising sells, PR tells, and it tells the story, doesn't it? The PR is the emotional connection, and that's what you're looking for. Your job is to introduce us, so your creditors tell us what we do as an author or a coach, or, and perhaps credit our website if it's suitable. And then our job is to be the great source of information for you. Is there any final kind of hints? And then we'll tell people how they can come on and actually get to pitch their story with you and ask you questions and then work with you as well, which is coming up on the 28th of May. Any final tips, Linda, before we let you go?
One of my final tips for talking to journalists is a lot of people terrified by this. Don't be afraid that you're afraid. It's not surprising. Be aware that not all journalists are the sort of Rottweilers you see on the 10 o'clock news. They're really not. Trade journalists in particular, people who deal with SMEs, they want to talk to you again. They want your story. They want to let you talk. They're not like, the political journalists who cut you down and shoot you down in flames and things like that. They don't do that because it would be counterproductive. They're cooperative people, mostly.
No, that's brilliant, and it is, don't be afraid, and also I love the fact that you talk about, because we've kind of lost the art of picking up the phone, but it does make a difference sometimes, and sometimes the journalist might be busy, you might say, I'll speak to you later, I'll have a look, but if there's a breaking story that's topical, that's trending, and that you feel that, really has value, it's still worth picking up the phone to speak to you, isn't it, or other journalists?
It is, but you must also understand that I actually don't pitch stories very often because I write features, so mostly. So very often you will come through to me with a good story and I will say, well, I can't write about that because I haven't got the outlet for it. And it happens occasionally and it's really sad, but I will mentally file that or even physically file that. And come back to you when I am writing something about that. But if you're scared of speaking to journalists, do a bit of practice. I've done some media training with a couple of companies, and you get people together and it's all a bit entertaining, really, and we all have a laugh. And in the process, if you get, say, 6 people together, it can be relatively cheap, and a lot of people have a good laugh and they get a bit of practice, and it's actually not very difficult. It's just about being you, but it's not something that anybody trains you for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do, and that's what we're doing at Blueberry Media and Media Matchmaker. We give everybody the resources and the training. So we've done great interviews like with yourself.
You're not going to get this from university.
Say that again, sorry.
You're not going to get talking to journalists as training in university. It's not the same presentations or speeches, none of them. Yeah, and it is practice, and it's hearing it from the horse's mouth. So people like you, it's invaluable. It really is. And because we're learning, we're knowing what you want, and it's reassuring. It really is, because I think a lot of us, and I know I certainly was at my start of my journey, I was scared. I didn't know where to start with PR. I didn't know how to write my story. And then I didn't know how to find the right type of journalist. And that's what we're doing now. We're helping everybody. So let me tell you guys, and thank you so much for watching this, or if you're watching it on replay, if you would like to join us, we're holding an event on May the 28th at 10 a.m. You can register a spot, and we call it the Meet the Journalist event. It's online. So Linda's going to be on, and you actually can ask your questions direct, whether it's relating to her or just journalism in general, and actually get to pitch a story. And this way, we're all going to learn from each other to see what makes a good story and what doesn't. And this is about learning. So it doesn't matter if we get it wrong, it's absolutely fine. But what Linda will help us do is actually spot the story. So I'm hoping you can come along on that. If any of you do want to connect to the right type of journalist and you're interested, I can definitely help you with that. Linda, I just want to say a big thank you, guys, as well. I'll put the registration link in this video down below, so you'll be able to click through and register your spot. Linda, thank you so much for your time. And I'm so sorry that we've had audio challenges and the time challenges, but we've got there at the end, didn't we? Anyway, thanks very much, Rachel. And I'm looking forward to the Meet the Journalist event, because I like nothing better than speaking to business people. They're interesting. They've all got stories to tell. So come along and tell me yours.
Thank you, and they're great opportunities. So make sure you can obviously join us on there, and you never know, you might be able to get to work with Linda in the future. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today, whether it's either on the live or on the replay, and we hope you can join us soon on our event, or you watch them live again soon. Have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you all soon. Take care.
Thanks very much. See you later.